Chapter 1 The Jackal's Vigil. In the time before time, when the gods walked the earth and the sands of Egypt whispered secrets of the universe, there stood a great and sprawling necropolis at the edge of the living world. It was a place where the boundaries between the mortal realm and the eternal beyond blurred, where the spirits of the departed embarked on their final, perilous journey. At the heart of this city of the dead, the necropolis, stood Anubis, the guardian, his jackal head held high, ears perked to catch the silent prayers of souls in need. Anubis, the son of Osiris and Nephthys, was born into a legacy of death and rebirth. His very essence was intertwined with the mysteries of the afterlife, and his purpose was as immutable as the stars that lined the path to the field of reeds. As the divine embalmer, he was the master of mummification, the sacred art that prepared the bodies of pharaohs and commoners alike for their journey into the afterlife. The necropolis was a labyrinth of tombs and temples, each stone structure a testament to the reverence the living held for the dead. It was here that Anubis watched over the mummification process, ensuring that each step was performed with precision and respect. The removal of organs, the drying of the body, the wrapping in linen, all were done under his watchful gaze, for any misstep could imperil the soul's passage. As night fell upon the land of Egypt, the stars blinked into existence, casting a celestial glow over the silent city. Anubis took his place atop a grand mausoleum, his eyes scanning the horizon. This was the time of the jackal's vigil, the sacred hours where the veil between worlds grew thin, and the spirits of the newly departed would begin their journey. On this particular night, a procession made its way through the necropolis, bearing the body of a nobleman who had passed from the world of the living. The mourners chanted hymns to Anubis, beseeching him to guide their loved one safely to the hall of truth, where his heart would be weighed against the feather of Maat. Anubis watched as the priests performed the opening of the mouth ceremony, restoring the senses to the deceased so that he might see, hear, and speak in the afterlife. The god's presence lent a silent strength to the ritual, his protection warding off any malevolent spirits that dared to approach. As the ceremony concluded and the mourners dispersed, Anubis descended from his perch. He approached the sarcophagus, laying a gentle hand upon the intricately carved lid. A whisper of power emanated from his touch, a final blessing to fortify the soul within. The god then turned his gaze to the stars, his thoughts reaching out to the souls making their way through the darkness. He knew the trials they would face, the lake of fire, the ravenous demon Ammit, and the final judgment before Osiris. It was his duty to ensure that they were prepared, that their hearts were light, and that truth guided their steps. Anubis, the guardian of the necropolis, resumed his vigil, the eternal sentinel between life and death. His presence was a promise, a beacon of hope for all who journeyed through the shadowed realms. And as the wheel of time turned, his watchful eyes remained ever fixed on the delicate balance of the afterlife, where each tale of passage was woven into the fabric of eternity. Chapter 2 Rites of Passage. The moon hung like a silver pendant in the ink-black sky, casting its pale light over the necropolis. It was a night of transition, a time when the veil between the worlds was at its thinnest, and the rites of passage would commence. Anubis, the guardian, stood sentinel over the city of the dead, his form a silent silhouette against the backdrop of ancient tombs. Within the heart of the necropolis, a new tale was unfolding. A pharaoh, great and powerful in life, had crossed into the realm of the dead. His passing had sent ripples through the mortal world and the divine, for he was a ruler beloved by his people and favored by the gods. Now, it was Anubis's sacred charge to oversee the pharaoh's journey through the afterlife. The pharaoh's body lay in the grandest chamber of the necropolis, surrounded by treasures and offerings to accompany him into the beyond. Anubis watched as the high priests and priestesses performed the intricate rituals of mummification with unwavering precision. The god's presence was a comforting force, a reminder that every step was sanctified and every incantation heard by the divine. Once the mummification was complete, the time came for the rites of passage, the ceremonies that would ensure the pharaoh's safe travel through the Duat, the treacherous underworld. Anubis himself led the procession, his jackal form moving with a grace that belied the solemnity of the occasion. The first rite was the weighing of the heart. In the hallowed chamber of judgment, Anubis stood by as the scales were prepared, the feather of Maat poised on one side, the heart of the pharaoh on the other. The balance of the scales would reveal the truth of the pharaoh's soul, whether it was as light as the feather or burdened with sin. The heart was placed upon the scale, and for a moment, all was still. Anubis watched, his gaze unwavering, as the scales tipped ever so slightly. The heart was light, untainted by wrongdoing, and the chamber filled with a sigh of relief. The pharaoh had lived a life of truth and justice, and he would be granted passage to the field of reeds. With the judgment passed, Anubis led the soul of the pharaoh deeper into the Duat. They traversed the darkened paths, the god's keen eyes alert for any dangers that lurked in the shadows. They encountered fearsome guardians and ancient spells, each a test of the pharaoh's virtue and resolve. Finally, they reached the shores of the celestial Nile, where the boat of millions of years awaited to carry the pharaoh across the heavens. Anubis stood by the pharaoh's side as he boarded the vessel, the stars reflecting in the still waters like a myriad of guiding lights. As the boat sailed into the night, Anubis returned to the necropolis, his duty fulfilled for this soul. Yet, the guardian knew his vigil was never ending. There would be more rites to oversee, more souls to guide, and more tales to be woven into the eternal tapestry of the afterlife. The necropolis lay quiet once more, the rites of passage complete. Anubis resumed his watch, the eternal guardian ensuring that every soul found its way, that every heart was weighed, and that the balance of life and death remained ever true. Chapter 3. The Weighing of the Heart. The stars wheeled overhead in their ancient dance, casting their indifferent light upon the world of mortals and gods alike. The necropolis, a city of silence and stone, lay bathed in their celestial glow, its tombs and temples standing as sentinels to the passage of time. In the midst of this eternal landscape, Anubis, the jackal-headed god, stood as the arbiter of fate, his presence a solemn reminder of the inescapable truth that awaited all souls. On this night, a soul of lesser renown than the pharaohs and nobles of past rites stood before Anubis, trembling with the weight of a life lived in the shadows of greatness. This was the soul of a scribe, one who had spent his days recording the deeds of others, his own story etched in the papyrus of his heart rather than on the monuments of the world. The scribe's body had been prepared with the same meticulous care as those of higher birth, for in the eyes of Anubis, all were equal in death. The god watched as the final wrappings were secured, the amulets placed, and the prayers recited. Now, it was time for the weighing of the heart, the moment that would determine the scribe's eternal destiny. In the hushed chamber of judgment, the scales of Maat stood ready, the feather of truth resting lightly upon one side. Anubis, with a gaze that pierced through all pretense, motioned for the heart to be brought forth. The scribe's heart, a record of his life's intentions and actions, was placed upon the scale, and the balance of the cosmos held its breath. The scales dipped and swayed, the heart's weight against the feather a testament to the scribe's earthly journey. Anubis watched, his expression inscrutable, as the scales came to rest in a perfect balance. The scribe had lived a life of honesty and diligence, his heart as light as the feather of truth. A collective sigh of relief whispered through the chamber, the tension dissipating like mist in the morning sun. Anubis stepped forward, his jackal form casting a long shadow across the chamber. He spoke, his voice the sound of eternity itself. "Scribe, your heart has been weighed and found true. You have recorded the tales of others, but now your own story shall be known in the field of reeds. Go forth with my blessing." With a guiding hand, Anubis ushered the scribe's soul toward the path that led deeper into the Duat. They journeyed past the gates guarded by fearsome creatures, through realms of darkness and light, each step a reflection of the scribe's inner strength. At last, they arrived at the banks of the celestial Nile, where the boat of millions of years awaited. The scribe, filled with awe, stepped onto the vessel, his heart light with the knowledge of his worthiness. Anubis watched as the boat departed, its sails catching the winds of the afterlife, carrying the scribe toward his eternal reward. The weighing of the heart was complete, another soul's fate determined by the balance of truth and justice. Anubis turned back to the necropolis, his duty to the scribe fulfilled, but his vigil unending. More souls awaited his judgment, more hearts to be weighed, and the god of mummification knew that his role in the cosmic order was as vital as the rise and set of the sun. The necropolis, under the watchful eye of Anubis, remained a place of passage, a realm where the living could find solace in the knowledge that their loved ones were guided by a just and vigilant guardian. And as the wheel of time turned, Anubis, the guardian of the necropolis, continued his eternal watch, ensuring that the scales of Ma'at remained true for all who came before him. Chapter 4. The Guardian's Guidance. Beneath the vast expanse of the heavens, the necropolis slumbered, its tombs and temples etched with the passage of countless ages. The air was thick with the scent of myrrh and the whispers of ancient incantations. Anubis, the jackal-headed god, stood as the unwavering guardian of the necropolis, his eyes reflecting the wisdom of the ages. On this night, a night like no other, a gentle breeze stirred the stillness, carrying with it the soul of a young woman whose life had been cut short by a sudden illness. Her family, stricken with grief, had performed the rites of mummification with loving hands, their tears mingling with the oils and spices that anointed her body. The young woman's spirit, fragile and disoriented, emerged into the realm of the dead, her eyes wide with the fear of the unknown. It was then that Anubis, the guardian, stepped forth, his presence a beacon of comfort in the shadowy realm. He approached the soul with a tenderness that belied his formidable appearance. "Do not fear, child," Anubis spoke, his voice a soothing balm to her troubled spirit. "I am here to guide you through the darkness, to lead you to the light of the field of reeds." The young woman looked upon the god with awe, her heart lifted by his words. Anubis extended his hand, and she took it, her trust in the guardian's guidance absolute. Together, they began the journey through the Duat, the perilous underworld that all souls must traverse. As they walked, Anubis shared the wisdom of the afterlife with the young woman. He spoke of the trials she would face, the demons and challenges that would test her resolve. But with each word, he also imparted the knowledge of how to overcome them, how to remain true to the purity of her heart. They came upon the first trial, the lake of fire, its flames a barrier to the unworthy. Anubis instructed the young woman to recite the spells he had taught her, and as she did, the flames parted, allowing them safe passage. Her confidence grew, bolstered by the guardian's unwavering support. Next, they encountered the demon Ammit, the devourer of souls, her jaws wide in anticipation of consuming the hearts of the deceitful. Anubis stood firm, his presence commanding the demon to retreat. The young woman's heart, free of malice, posed no interest to Ammit, and they passed unharmed. Finally, they arrived at the Hall of Truth, where the weighing of the heart would take place. The young woman's spirit trembled, but Anubis reassured her with a gentle nod. Her heart was placed upon the scales, and the feather of Ma'at took its place opposite. The scales balanced perfectly, a testament to the young woman's virtuous life. With the judgment passed, Anubis led the soul to the shores of the celestial Nile, where the boat of millions of years awaited. The young woman stepped aboard, her spirit aglow with the promise of eternal peace. Anubis watched as the boat sailed away, his duty to this soul fulfilled. The guardian's guidance had seen the young woman safely through the trials of the afterlife, her passage secured by the wisdom and protection of Anubis. The necropolis once more settled into silence, the eternal cycle of life and death continuing unabated. Anubis resumed his watch over the city of the dead, his heart content in the knowledge that he had once again served as the guiding light for a soul in need. The guardian of the necropolis stood ready, his vigilance a constant assurance that all who entered his realm would find the guidance they required, their journey through the afterlife shepherded by the jackal-headed god of mummification and the afterlife. Beneath the blanket of night, the necropolis whispered tales of eternity, its every stone a chronicle of lives once lived. Anubis, the guardian, his silhouette a constant against the constellations, watched over this realm where silence reigned supreme. It was here, in the hallowed grounds of eternal slumber, that the souls of mortals found their rest, cradled in the arms of the afterlife. In the quietude, Anubis moved with purpose, his steps a silent benediction upon the tombs of the departed. Each soul, a story, each story, a thread woven into the fabric of the infinite. The jackal-headed god paused, his gaze piercing the veil of mortality, ensuring that peace enveloped the slumbering spirits. And so, as the wheel of time spun its ceaseless dance, Anubis stood sentinel, the eternal guardian whose watchful eyes promised safekeeping through the ages. In the necropolis, where the past embraced the future, the spirits rested in the assurance of an everlasting peace, guarded by Anubis, the shepherd of souls, the protector of the eternal slumber.